Hello, welcome back to the Tracy Developer Meetup. So this is our April edition, and with us again we have Corbin Crutchley. So
Hello.
he is, yes, awesome. He is one of our repeat guests, probably the most repeated guest, and definitely a pretty damn good one too. This time around, we'll actually be covering, I think, Rust and JavaScript, right? Right, Corbin?
I'm mostly going to be talking about Rust today, but I will be including some JavaScript as kind of like a stand-in point for reference. So
Awesome. Yeah, and so just some logistical stuff. So we are live. We are engaging in the chat. If Corbin doesn't see it, I'll raise it to his attention as well. So if you have a question, please drop us a line. If there's any kind of technical hiccups, maybe the audio is bad, maybe the video is bad, let us know. We'll be plugging some links throughout. And Corbin, you recently got a new job, right? You
I
want to
did
tell us a little bit
indeed.
about that?
Yeah, so I'm now developer relations for CoderPad. As Nick, I've been trying to get into developers relations for a long time, so I'm super excited to be, writing blog posts, giving talks, and engaging with the community, as my day job. CoderPad, we do an online IDE specifically for interviews. Interviewer will send you a CoderPad link, and you guys can engage with a chat. There's video calling built in. There's dual programming, so you can do pair programming. Kind of just a really cool environment to be able to have like a standardized way to do interviews. So
Awesome, but I don't think tonight's session is related, right?
So actually, I will be using CoderPad to live code a demo that I have prepared towards the end. So we are kind of related, and we do actually support Rust as one of our programming languages. We have like 30 different programming languages that we support. So. Yeah.
Awesome. Before we get into that, if you're tuning in on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that like button on the video, subscribe to the channel, and also head over to tracydevs.com, which is our event landing page, and get information on all of the events that are happening this year, which I think all the events this year, at least up until the fall, are going to be remote friendly.
Yes.
Corbin, over to you. Should I share your screen?
Yeah, for sure. Go for it.
Sweet.
All right, gang. So this is going to be a talk about Rust enums, some pattern matching, some operators, a bunch of different stuff. But at the heart of it, we're going to be taking a look at the options API, aka like the options enum, and some of Rust's built-in features that are really powerful. They're more introductory features, so if you're more familiar with Rust, this may be a little bit of a review for you. But if you haven't seen Rust, and maybe you've heard a lot about it, it's been kind of like a hot ticket item in the web dev community. This is the right place for you, right? Like being able to take a look at some of Rust's cooler features, So let's start with enums. If you are familiar with TypeScript, enums may be familiar to you. If you're only used to JavaScript, they may be a little bit kind of unfamiliar. So we can declare an enum. And basically what an enum is that it's an allow list of values, right? So we have an enum called CodeLang, and CodeLang can either be Rust, JavaScript, Swift, or Kotlin. It can be one of those, but it can't be anything outside of those. So if we do something like let lang, variable declaration, equals CodeLang version Rust, right? The Rust enum, we will be able to use that in a function here and return the value, right? So we can use it as a prop type, right? If you're familiar with TypeScript, this is how you type out like properties values, or property types, and then you can pass lang into get function, all sorts of good stuff, right? So we can do an if inside of a lang to be able to check the version, right? So like if lang is of Rust, right? If let Rust, which reads a little weird, but this is how you do an if statement basically. So if lang is of type CodeLang Rust, return this version number. Otherwise, if it's of JavaScript, return 2021, because JavaScript uses a slightly different version formatting than most languages. But then we also have an empty string as a default, right? But we don't have to use if statements. If you're familiar with JavaScript, you may have heard of like switch case, right? Switch case is very similar to match. Match is a lot more powerful, which we'll touch on a little bit here. But for basic example, we'll do a match lang, just like a switch lang. And then these are the versions. And these little arrows are kind of like implicitly returned values. So if Rust, return this version. If JavaScript, return this version, so on and so forth, right? We also have the ability to use the underscore to declare if it isn't being matched. So you can think of this kind of like the default state in a switch case. So match lang, if it's Rust, we return 1.46. If we don't know the version, or if it's any of the other potential values of code lang, we'll return unknown version, right? So here we'd go to Rust, we'd match the lang, it would be 1.46, and then we'd print that line, kind of like a console.log. We also have the ability to match two items at once, and this is where Rust match is a little bit more powerful than switch case, in my opinion, is that you can have like multiple different items matching. So if you want to get the version of both Rust and Python, you can check the code lang enum, the values, and then return them as like two items in a, I forget what this is called, but being able to do return of multiple different items. So yeah. Actually, this print line, this isn't quite right. I need to do ver, comma, other ver, or something like that. We also have the ability to do value storage, which is where enums get really powerful, right? So you'll notice that we're storing a U8, which is an integer, basically, a very small integer, inside of the Python version. So here, we can say something along the lines of code line Python, but then we're passing 2 inside of the enum. Right? So not only are we saying that this enum is of type Python, but we're appending the version, the major version of Python into here, right? So if we supported both Python 2 and 3, which we do, we'll be able to store these values separately. So we use if let again, but you notice here, we're wrapping the version to get it, right? So we're kind of unwrapping it from here to get it into a variable. So if let Python set the version and check if version 2 is Python, then we're able to console log or print line the version of Python. We can also use match to unwrap the values. So very similarly to how we do things in the if let, we check in the match if one of the items is Python. We get the version, right? And then we can check if version equals 3, return 3.8. Otherwise, it's 2.7, right? So we're able to more precisely get. Keep in mind, we could do, if we did something like this, we could do Python 2, like we could use the enum value unwrapping with multiple items. We can use underscores. We can use all the same features of match. And this is why match is like really powerful, especially combined with the value storage. I don't know why these are overlaid. Oh, hang on. I might have to go in here and fix this really quick. So we also have the ability...
the joys of Google Slides.
Yeah, I know. I swear I ran through this before and it was working. I must have accidentally deleted something. Hang on, let me...
Oh, you got like 100 of them behind.
I know, this is the problem. This is what I always... Oh my God, okay, fine. So here's which one do I want to cover first? Contain some or none? Geez, this is going very swell. Thank you for your patience, everyone. So keep in mind, you can do, that's the one I want last. Let's look at this, right? So the option API allows you to have, it's in enum, right? So the declaration might look something like this, right? So option contains type T, which is just a generic type, similar to TypeScript's generic types. You have the option for none, which is no value, or some, which wraps the value T, right? So if you're able to take a look here, you can see that we're wrapping a string inside of option. So if Rust or JavaScript or Python are matched, we're going to say we're returning some value, right? So some 1.46, some 2010, 2021, so on and so forth, right? But then if we don't know the version number, instead of just some unknown string, we can say return none, right? So here we can say something along the lines of if none. So if Swift version is none. So like we can see that we're returning none if we don't see any of these. Swift is not included, so we're returning none. And if the Swift version is none, we can say can't find the Swift version. We can also do things from, I need to move this up. We can also use the match, right? So if we get the code version and it is some and we unwrap it, then we can do a print line saying your version is whatever, 1.46. Or if it's none, we can say we can't find the version, right? So very powerful API here. And one of the things that makes the API so powerful is operators, right? So you may be familiar, before we talk about Rust operators, which will tie in with options API, let's take a look at JavaScript, right? Let's take a look at like what JavaScript has to offer for operators. So here we can see like JavaScript chaining, right? So for example, if you use numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4 in an array, you can use filter, you can use map, you can use flat map, right? All of these functions take a value, which is t, in this case, like an array, and returns t, aka an array, right? So we're getting a bit into type theory and a bit into like this. I forget what this is called. It's like a, I'm not even going to name it, but there's a really complicated name for all this stuff. But the idea is that like if we do a filter, we're able to check the even numbers only. If we do a map, we can get the array still. So notice that for these two, we're not returning an array, even though they are kind of like we're mapping two arrays, but we're not returning an array itself. But here, when we're doing flat map, we're able to return an array and have it flattened down into that initial array, right? They can also be used individually like this, or they can be, because they all return arrays, we can also chain them together, right? So the codes from 2 to 9 are exactly the same as 12 to 15. It does the exact same operator or operations. So the way that these work under the hood is that they use the this operator. If you're familiar with JavaScript, JavaScript does some weird things with classes and types called prototype inheritance. And in this case, numbers would be an of array. So array.prototype.map allows you to reference the actual code itself, right? So this in the numbers example would be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then you can do a simple for loop. You can use that function. And then when you call that function with those values, you're able to push it and return it. That's how a basic prototype map would work in JavaScript, right? Rust is very similar. So Rust has the options API, right? So get version still returns option string. So we can do that match. And inside of that match, we can return a sum or we can return a num, right? So basically what we're doing is we're converting or mapping this string to here and safely handling none, right? So we can rewrite this. We can rewrite this like this, right? So just like we'd have an arrow function that we pass into map, we can do options.map val and then pass val into the format. This is an implicit return. So we could say return format or just leave it as format. And if we do, what will happen is that this string will become version string. Or if it's none, version string will stay none. This map won't actually instantiate. And then when we check if it's some, it'll print out that string, right? So that would be implemented. Wow. My slides are very broken tonight. That's very frustrating.
It happens.
Come on. I don't even know where that picture went. At any rate, it's very similar to how this is written. So instead of and then, you'd have map, and then it would wrap sum in it. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's written very similarly to how you would write the map in JavaScript. There's also and then operator, which is similar to map, but handles is more similar to flat map in JavaScript in the sense that you do return some or none. So before you just return the string value, you wouldn't have to wrap it in some, you wouldn't have to wrap it in none or anything like that. But with the and then operator, you do wrap it in some or none, and then it unwraps those values and turns it into a some or none respectively, right? So here we can check if value contains a period. And if it does, then we'll just say your version number is whatnot. Otherwise, we consider it an invalid version and just return none. Right? So JavaScript, even though it does have a string that doesn't contain a period, so it would be none. Version string would be none. This if statement would fail. Nothing would go through. Right? So, and then would be written something like this. In this case, self is more similar to how this works in JavaScript. So we're saying given self, so given the operator and a function, right, this val, return an option of type u, which is just a generic type. And what we do is we match this. And once we match it, we can run some function over it, or we just return none, right? So very similar to how the map operator works in JavaScript. So we can actually combine these things. Let's take a look at an example question, and then let's enhance that example question. So am I zoomed in enough? I think I should be.
Yeah, it looks great.
So, sorry?
Saying it looks great.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So let's take all of what we've learned together and actually build like a quick demo, right? So let's say that we have code languages, right? We have Swift, we have Python, we have a value inside of Python, we have JavaScript, we have Rust, right? Inside of get version, we want to take a language, right? So one of these enum values, and we want to return an option. Once we match that language, if it's Rust, we return some version number. If we return JavaScript, we want some version number. Python, we want some version number depending on what's inside that U8, right? And then same thing with Swift. So what if we wanted to get the major, minor, and patch version of each of these programming languages? So for example, if Rust, we'd want it to output something like major 1, patch 46, minor 46, patch 0, or major 2021, minor 0, patch 0, right? So what we could do is we could use this regex, right, just to prove this regex actually works. Mostly for myself, because the demos have not been kind to me today. So we can see that 2021 matches, 2021.20 matches, and 2021.20.20 matches, right?
Pretty daring to do regex live right there.
Well, this has been pre-coded out regex, yeah. But honestly, I've grown to become very, very, very comfortable with regex. Slight tangent. My very first programming job, I once refactored 500,000 lines of code using a 180 character regex.
Oof, you should be entered into Guinness for that.
It was terrible, and it was a 2-day thing. Anyways. So you can see this regex, all it's checking for is decimals, and then a period and more decimals, and then a period and more decimals. But each of these last two are optional, right? So that's capture group 1, that's capture group 2, that's capture group 3. So what we're doing here is we're saying get the version, right? So get the string, and keep in mind that this is an option API. Then we're going to say, given that option, match or map it using and then, so basically map then unwrap, so kind of like flat map, to version regex.captures. What this will do is this will return an object, not really an object, but an option that allows you to be able to run things like capture group.get the first one and map it to a string, right? Because otherwise get is like a whole object, and we don't want that. We just want the string inside, right? So keep in mind, get and map work. Get returns an option, so it'll be some or none. Map will keep that as a none if it is a none beforehand. So let's say that we have 2021, right? What will happen is here, 2021 turns into captures 2021. An option, The map will say get one will be option capture 2021, right? And then as string, we'll turn that into 2021. Here, get two will become none, right? Because there is no capture, like we're not capturing a second group here. Then as string will stay none because we're using a map here. So none of this is actually getting through. So this is a none. So if we pass in 2021, major minor captures would be 2021, comma, none, or I'm sorry, some 2021, none, right? And then when we did the major minor, we check first whether first opt is a sum. If it is a sum, we want to pass it. And then if minor is a sum, we want to pass that as well. But we're also checking if major is captured as sum, but nothing is captured in the second. If we do that, we're returning sum major comma 0, right? And then finally, we're using an if statement to say if let sum, here, we'll write major, we'll write minor. Here we're saying major blank, minor blank, patch, empty string, right? So what we can do is if I run this, can I not resize this? What am I doing wrong? There we go. I think it's weird. Yeah, I think I just did something wrong. But what we'll see,
like yeah, one more.
Yeah, perfect. So here we'll see 2021 because we're passing in JavaScript, right? And then minor is 0 because we're mapping the none here to 0. And then we're saying patch is nothing because we're passing in an empty string right now. Let me zoom in one more time just to be safe. Likewise with Rust, if we look at the version of Rust we're supporting, it's 1.46, right? So major 1, minor 46. And then we also have, I've experienced in leaving iron outside and making Rust. Very funny, Kevin. And then our major for Swift would be 5, 1. But oh no, that patch version isn't being supported, right? So we do want to pass this patch version of 2. So we don't need to modify our regex. Our regex is just fine. We also don't need to update our captures because that's just fine. But here, what we can do is we can say caps.get 3 and do that same map. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to add one more here. We want to say if some patch, and we'll do major minor patch. Otherwise, we'll check if some major, if some minor, 0. Otherwise, if only major is captured, we'll do 0, 0, 0, right? And now here we need to update this because now instead of receiving 2 versions, we're receiving 3. We got a good question from Kevin Petio, actually. Is this major minor patch to serve code based on versioning? So it's not that we're, it is versioning, right? I don't know whether all of these program languages follow the same semver, right? So I know JavaScript doesn't quite follow the same version of semver, but some of these other programming languages might. However, what we're doing is we're treating them as if they are semver, right? So we're trying to unwrap them and check what the major minor patch values might be, right? So great question, very good question. Then here we'll have patch. Right. So just to do review again, what we're saying is get the capture group 3. Right. So we'll rewrite this. Get 3 equals none in JavaScript. Or if it were Swift, it would match 2. Right. So it would be option capture 2. And then when we did as string, it would be sum2. Now once we have all three of these together, we want to check whether sum is existing for major, minor, and patch. Excuse me. If we do, we just combine them together. If only major and minor exist and none is being set for the third one, we simply set the major, minor, and default to 0 for none. Likewise, if the major is set, but neither the minor nor the patch are, we set major 0, 0. And then at the end here, we say if let sum, major, minor, patch. We're able to pass those in using the format for print line. And then when I click run, what did I do wrong? First opt, second opt. I forgot third opt. That's important. There we go, because I was only matching the first two, and it didn't end. See, one of the nice things about Rust is that it can actually warn you about these things. I was checking for 3 values here, but only passing 2 values, and Rust went, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not possible. Slow down. Let's reevaluate and see what we're able to do. So definitely one of the nice features about something like Rust, and their match API is very compiler safe, which is nice. So here we can see 2021 for JavaScript, the minor of 0 and patch in 0. Meanwhile, the Rust is 1.46.0 and Swift is 5.1.2. So there we go. We were just able to add a little bit of functionality to a super basic. And that'll be all for today.
We just lost your microphone for a second. You want to repeat the last
20
seconds? I don't know if it was just me.
No worries. So yeah, we were able to review the application and build a super simple type checker, which allows us to utilize Rust powerful options API and type safety. So we were able to see that Rust was able to warn me when something went wrong, and then build a quick demo app within less than 100 lines of code. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with Rust. When I've been using it.
And maybe I missed this, or maybe you didn't go over it. I'm not sure. So I guess while questions come in, since you said that we're towards the end, I'll ask some questions because I'm legitimately interested in Rust.
Yeah, go for it.
Does Rust allow you to cross-compile? And I mean, I'm thinking of this as a Go developer, being able to, because Rust is machine code, right? You can create. Do you need to have any kind of special tool chains available, or can you just enter a command to do it?
I honestly don't know. I know that Rust is supported in Windows and Mac OS and Linux, all the major programming languages. In fact, there are some people who are even able to get Rust compiling for Android and iOS, which is really cool. But I don't know much about the compiler process, admittedly. So.
Got it. And this is cool, and this CoderPad stuff is really cool too. That you're able to actually run it.
Yeah, and we have a ton of different programs. We even have SQL support. I have Postgres. We have SQL and all sorts of other voodoo magics, MySQL as well, and
yeah. And now I might have missed it again. You say you're on line 1. You're saying use regex. Is that built into Rust, or did you actually download this as a dependency on line 1?
No, so it's, I want to say it's an officially maintained package, but it is a dependency, and that's why I'm using use Rust or regex here. But it is part of the language specification, and for all intents and purposes, it is the language. It's just not default included because of bundle sizes and whatnot. So
cool.
But yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward to use. I mean, it took me all of 10 minutes.
And I think I had looked at this a few years back, and I was a little scared of it because it looked very close to C++, but maybe it's evolved a lot since then.
Well, one of the nice advantages of Rust over, say, C++ is that you don't really have to address pointers very often, right? It's much more memory safe than C++, right? Because with C++, I had a friend who, if I looked hard enough, I could probably dig up his code. He wrote a memory corruptor within 10 lines of C++, right? And if you ran that code, it would completely garble your RAM and just crash your computer, right? And like, that's
Yeah.
so scary that you can do that in 10 lines of code, you know? So Rust
Yeah.
does a lot better job at making sure that, like, okay, you're not allowed to do that stuff. Like, we're going to be much more forceful with our compiler errors to make sure that you're handling things properly.
Sure. And can you install Rust with, say, Homebrew and Chocolatey and those
Yeah.
package managers?
Yep. Totally.
Let's
That's
do
how,
that
in
straight
fact,
away.
that's how I install Rust on my local machine.
Got
So,
it. Uh, if you have any questions for Corbin right now on
yeah.
Rust, I mean, this is a
Yeah.
great introduction to it.
Thank you.
And Rust, I don't know what you've seen in the industry, but I see Rust being picked up so heavily right now,
Oh, yeah.
as far as a desirable skill.
Oh, yeah.
Even I think it's even growing faster than Go is growing right now, or was growing.
Yeah,
So
so one of the cool things is that so Rust was started by Mozilla as a project, right?
yeah,
But they've opened it up to a certain foundation, right? So, like, a very standardized organization, and even Microsoft is joining in that foundation and contributing directly to Rust. Linux recently just announced that they were going to start building parts of the Linux kernel in Rust. So
yeah.
Rust has a really robust foundation of people helping support it and organize it and stuff. So came in late, but what is Rust used for? So Rust is a compiled language. So very similarly to how C++ or C compile down to assembly code. But Rust has a super, super powerful compiler, like, even to the point where what we might expect to be a runtime mistake as JavaScript developers is a compiler error, right? And that helps prevent you from making, kind of like, I'll be honest, if I hadn't gotten that compiler error, I would have wondered for 10, 15 minutes what was going wrong, right? And like, the compiler in Rust is super, super, super powerful with being able to go, hey, you're making mistakes, don't do
Yeah.
that, right? As a full stack dev, should I get into Rust? I think it depends, right? I think that Rust is quickly growing. And I mean, Rust, there's even an alternative to React Native, which is using Rust right now. Like, there's a Rust
Wow.
web view that they're trying to push as like a competitor to React Native, where you write your native code in Rust, right? And it runs on Android, iOS, and desktop and everything else, and just uses a web view to render, right? To be honest, though, I think that Rust is much more beneficial in high performance applications. One of those applications, though, which is super relevant to web dev, is WebAssembly. One of the very first languages that I know of, at least, to be supported in WebAssembly is Rust, right? And in fact, I've worked for companies that have built major projects that required high performance to be written in Rust and just ran in WebAssembly in the browser. So there's certainly a lot of really cool stuff going on there. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
So do you find yourself using Rust more than you use JavaScript now, or are you back on JavaScript?
So I think that where I fit in is much more front end engineering role,
Yeah.
at least like historically.
Sure.
So like, my biggest project that I'm working on in my spare time is a React Native project, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm writing a lot of like Java for Android and a lot of React code. That said, I've already made the decision that for my desktop version of that application, I will be using Rust for some of the native code. So there,
Wow.
I have definitely switched to Rust for a lot of stuff. So
We have another question coming in.
yeah, is it to crunch through data? So it can be. It can be for encoding or decoding complex data. It can be for complex rendering, right? So maybe you're building a video game and you want some really complex effects. You can use OpenGL and Rust on WebAssembly to be able to build a game in Rust that runs on the browser, right? One of the companies that I know of actually built like a shell in the browser that allowed you to run terminal commands. That was pretty cool. There's a lot that you can do with high performance that's just not number crunching. So
And that's because it's not an interpreted language. You're not
right.
installing a Java runtime or Node.js or even Python, which is pretty fast.
Right. Well, it runs in machine language, so it's as fast as you can get, basically.
Yeah,
So
like C++.
yep. So
Yeah, these are all great questions coming
yes,
in.
fantastic. Please feel free to continue asking.
Yeah. While we wait for these questions to trickle in, you mind if we plug next month's meetup?
Go for it. Yeah.
Since you're already sharing your screen, maybe I can get you to navigate to the site, just tracydevs.com.
Yeah, totally. I can type. I love how I was able to type pretty well in coding, and then as soon as I get out of the coding thing,
Yeah.
upcoming events.
Yeah. So upcoming events. So next month, which is May, we have Ray Camden making an appearance again. We're going to be looking at some automated serverless workflows with Pipedream.
Speaking about another new job, he just landed a role at Adobe.
Yeah, he went full circle. He was at Adobe, and now he's back at Adobe.
Yeah,
but he says he loves it there. So
yeah, you're definitely not going to want to miss his talk. Ray Camden is like the pro.
Yeah, he was back a few months ago, I think, doing some server. Wait, what was he doing actually? He did something cool. I know that. I think it was serverless. He's a serverless guy. Right. He's a fan. Yep. But yeah, no, we have a pretty full summer. So we've got some Flutter development, so mobile, and then the last meetup that I'm trying to schedule, it's still like under development, but we're hoping to have a resume and kind of job hunting session, and the details are still being worked on, but it's always a good idea to dust off that resume and learn about actually how to get that phone call for that job you want. So this is a beneficial one regardless on if you're in tech or not.
Yep, totally. Speaking of, I'm actually going to use that as a segue. So resumes are super difficult, and they're like the first step to an interview process, right? Not only are resumes difficult, but the interview process can be very frustrating, very confusing as well. So I've actually been hosting mock interviews on our live stream. So please, I am on Twitter. Please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I am happy to schedule some time to do a dedicated mock interview session with you. I'd be happy to give interview advice. We have a community that talks about interviews. So please feel free to reach out to me if any of that sounds interesting.
What kind of mock interviews are these? What positions?
So we've had a few different roles. So I've done mock interviewing for junior developers, right? People who are kind of new to the industry. I've also done mock interviews for more senior positions where you're able to do front end web. Also, hello, Snake. But yeah, you can basically any role that you want to prep for, please let me know. A great example, I'm hoping to schedule someone who's doing Swift next month or so, right? So I'm going to be brushing off some of my Swift skills to make sure that I can do that kind of mock interview properly. So I'd be happy to talk about a different program language that I might not be comfortable with, but maybe we can get someone on who is. We have kind of our whole engineering team at CoderPad that's able to have various backgrounds and be able to help run this as well. So
I think that's all right if you're not too familiar, because chances are at least sometime in your life as an interviewer, you're going to interview somebody who has a skill that you don't know.
Totally.
So part of the process.
Yeah. Side note, this talk has also been turned into a blog post. So if you think, man, this went by really fast, I wish I had a place that I could read this. I'll actually send this in the private chat because I don't know quite how to send this.
And I'll drop it.
Okay, sounds good. But yeah, this article explains some of the operator stuff and getting things together, and has that example at the end that you can try out for yourself if you're curious to kind of apply some of what you've learned tonight. So please feel free to check that out.
Sweet. How we got a question coming in from Alex. How is the transition going from JS to Rust?
Yeah. So I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a transition. I'm not abandoning JavaScript. I still love JavaScript. I think that there's a lot of advantages to when to use those languages. But in terms of my learning of Rust, it's been a really smooth transition. I think with other native languages, I've had difficulties because of the limitations of native, right? Like maybe like arrow functions might not have been a thing, or complex typings may have been limited, right? And as the TypeScript developer, those things are like, my bread and butter. So one of the cool things that I really appreciate about Rust is like self. It's just a thing. It's just supported, right? Or these like arrow functions, right? Like lambdas, they're just supported in Rust. That's so cool to me, So definitely like this functional API as a JavaScript developer was like, oh man, I know how to do this. This is like, I love that. That's actually what spurred this whole article and everything, is that like, I kind of got obsessed with these operators. I was like, yo, these are JavaScript. Like, I know this. I'm so familiar. So it's been a really cool learning experience for Rust. And the community has been really cool. They have an official Discord, which is really nice. And they're the friendly people. So
Nice.
yeah.
You got any other shameless plugs on your list, Corbin?
Not too much. Feel free to, honestly, if you even want to talk about React, I'm doing a React article right now, maybe turn it into a talk at some point. But if you have any questions or comments or anything, if you just want to chat, feel free to reach out. So
sweet. I didn't see any more questions come in. So maybe we call it, but this is a fantastic introduction, Corbin.
Thank you. So Nick, thanks for always having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll see you again in a few months, right?
For sure.
All right. See you later, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care again.